So I'm back. I was having a heck of a time with the computer because since I did the Windows 10 update, my system was not recording correctly. So whenever I tried to make videos for you guys and continue this conversation, in fact, I made 6 of them. Okay, I tried 6 different times to make a video for you or 2 videos for you, but after the Windows 10 update, my system, the microphone was sounding very slow, like, 45 record that was doing that, 72 RPM thing, or I don't remember how that went, but like it was playing very slowly. It sounded very slurred and it was garbled, like you couldn't really make sense of the sound. And I couldn't figure out why that was happening. And I did every type of troubleshoot, sound check I could do. I'm stopping for a second because I'm trying to start there we go, my stopwatch, just so I'm conscious of the time. Because this particular video app I'm using does not have time recording on the side. So to keep conscious, you'll see me occasionally, I'm gonna look down because I'm checking from my phone to make sure that I'm not running too long. Anyway, the problem turned out to be, in case anybody else is having this issue, there's a setting, a microphone array setting that you have to find, at least in my computer. The instructions I found online, it didn't match up exactly, where they told me to go, right click on the sound icon in the menu bar, and then I was supposed to see certain things, and those certain things were not there. So I couldn't find the section and the little window box I was supposed to find in order to adjust this problem. And it took me quite some time to find it in a rather obscure place, in a rather obscure way. But nevertheless, I found it, and now the videos are working. So I'm very pleased. Back to what I was talking about before, trying to remember where I was exactly when I left off on that first video. I believe I had mentioned, well, I talked about quite a few things, but one of the things I believe I mentioned was, well, it's a topic I want to talk about. I was talking about letting go of certain foods. We talked about color span of foods and which foods in the color spectrum that you need to remove from your diet and remove from your habits and lifestyle, especially if you have cancer already. If you have a predisposition for cancer, if you have the gene in your family line or whatever, then you definitely need to try to abstain or stay away from these foods, predominantly within that particular color spectrum that I mentioned in the first video. But one of the things I mentioned in that first video was that I said orange colors, red colors, yellow colors, and white. And when I mentioned red, I mentioned red bell peppers. And then I said also the green. So really, bell peppers in general, and the reason that you need to abstain from bell peppers in general is because those are part of a group of vegetables that have a high amount of a particular type of chemical in it that is toxic for our bodies. So let me explain it to you this way. These chemicals are called lectins. And I just recently found out about this, and I've begun to take these particular foods out of my diet. So when I mentioned to you on the color spectrum, I talked about the red, excuse me, I'm sorry, a little tight in my throat. I talked about the red colors. So I said tomatoes and I said bell peppers. Tomatoes is a hard one for me because, as it happens, I love tomatoes. And I had just found these fabulous little Italian tomatoes. Publix just started selling mini bags of these tomatoes, but BJ's has them in larger bags, and they're kind of oblong shaped, and they're kind of the pop in your mouth kind of tomatoes. and they are amazing. And it hurt my heart, if I could say that. It hurt my heart to have to say goodbye to those tomatoes. Plus, I had just started trying out those, you know, those multicolored different little ones, oranges and reds and kind of semi-green or purplish looking ones. I was just starting to get into all of these, and I thought, okay, these are a new type of tomato, and maybe they are, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a new homeopathic blend or something. And I figured they were going to be very healthy. But then I found out about these lectins. So I mentioned the bell peppers last time, and I also mentioned the tomatoes. Potatoes fall in the same line, but we already know that you have to cut out anything white. So potatoes will already be knocked out in that, you know, lineup. But then there's also eggplants, and I love eggplants, especially the Chinese eggplants. Those are absolutely amazing with garlic. To live for. But anyway, I won't say to die for, to live for. So the reason that you have to let these go, and I'm trying to remember if, oh yes, the other ones are, let me catch you on the other ones. The other ones are peanuts. And here hurts my heart once again, cashews. Thankfully, I can still do my almonds because I love almonds. But cashews and peanuts also have a very high count of these lectins in them. So these are things that you want to stay away from. The reason is, okay, if I can explain lectins to you, it's like this. Every single plant has chemicals in them. And these chemicals have different purposes and different processes. And part of this particular chemical's purpose is to protect the plant against invaders. So if you took a plant type that, say, an elephant eats, and you fed that plant type to a rabbit, the rabbit would die. Why? Because the amount of lectins in that plant that is built in to repel predators is too high for an animal as small as a rabbit. An animal as large as an elephant can handle the number of lectins in that particular type of plant food because it's a larger animal, and apparently its body is built to handle larger amounts of those type of chemicals from the plants that it is ingesting. But a rabbit does not have the same, let's call it, harmonic balance as far as their ability to ingest that much lectins. They only have a certain percentage of lectins that their digestive system can handle before it's an overload and it becomes toxic and poisonous. So the particular plants that I mentioned to you and the nuts are of a higher level of lectins. So high, in fact, and I'm sorry, I'm getting a little congestion right now, probably because I have my fan on, but I was hot earlier. But the amount of lectins that are in those particular foods that I mentioned, in a human body, those lectins are destroying our ecological system in the gut. And it's like stripping it. It's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, oh, okay, here it is. Okay, remember when all this talk started coming out about leaky gut? These lectins is what causes leaky gut. These lectins tear holes in the lining of the stomach and cause the leaky gut condition that ends up allowing certain toxins, viruses, bacteria to leak into other areas of your body from the gut, into your bloodstream and so forth. And this causes a lot of harm to your body. So as a result, that is why these particular plants have to be left alone. Oh, and the other one I forgot to mention are beans. And that was a hard one to swallow as well. But I have since found out that, oh, by the way, the highest lectin count of beans would be the red beans, and the black beans are right behind it. Now, I particularly prefer pinto beans. So what I found out is that you can take the beans and soak them, but you've got to soak them longer than the standard time. You have to soak them for 12 hours, not 8. Okay, I avoid beans in a can now because of this whole thing with the lectins. And by the way, if you're suffering from lectin poisoning and or leaky gut, that is also another precursor to a cancerous type condition or diabetes type condition, because the gut is being affected, the immune system is being impaired. If the immune system is being impaired, that means that you are wide open for attack, in simple terms. Wide open for viruses and bacteria and anything else like that to attack your body. So with the beans, as I was saying, if you soak them for 12 hours, and in that 12 hours you have to change the water frequently, and that water you must put baking soda in that water. I think it's about 2 tablespoons of baking soda in the water, and you soak it, but you have to change the water several times in the course of soaking it in order to cut down the amount of lectins. And then also when you go to cook it, you've got to boil it on high for I think about 30 minutes or so. I'll try and get the exact time frames and numbers and so forth, but I'm pretty sure it's a minimum of 30 minutes. You boil it on high temperature, and then that will cut the lectin down from the count. It will cut the lectin count down from like 20,000 to like 200. So it makes a big difference when you soak it for a longer period of time. Overnight alone is not going to cut it. It needs to be at least 12 hours. So in that way, this is what I'm trying to find out, if certain of those foods that were alleged to be healthier, and they are plant-based foods, I'm trying to figure out a way of, if there's a preparation issue where we could prepare it a different way that would help to cut down the amount of lectins in it and make it actually edible for us to have, and it won't affect our gut and cause leaky gut. That's what I'm looking for. So haven't finished researching that yet, but the beans is the first one that I kind of started with. Until I find out everything, I have cut out the tomatoes, the bell peppers of all colors, the potatoes, and peanuts. I don't eat anyway because I don't care for them. The cashews I've cut also, and the eggplant. Those are the ones that I know of thus far, along with grains. Grains that's a hard one. I haven't cut out the grains yet. I can tell you that right now. That's a struggle, but I'm trying to be a bit more selective with the grains that I'm still currently ingesting. So I go to Publix and I look for their sprouted bread. They have their own brand of sprouted bread, and I know that sprouted anything is a lot healthier for you than the regular preparation way that they do, especially with the breads. So in their bakery department, at least in certain stores, not all of them carry it, but in the one near my house, in their bakery department, they have a rack sitting outside, just outside the bakery deli part section there, where you order your cakes and stuff. And on that rack are a whole bunch of different breads that Publix produces. And among them is the sprouted bread. So I have been buying that sprouted bread, and it is very good. I love it, actually. I like it a lot better than what I was eating before. So until I can completely wean myself off of the grains, I am trying to at least change the grains that I'm ingesting. But grains follow the same pattern, the same thing. They have very high lectin count. It does cause leaky gut. And aside from that, the grains are one of those things that falls within the color spectrum that I mentioned to you before. And so it is something that we need to wean out of our diet. So I'm trying to slowly progress in that and try to wean it out of my diet little by little. I try to stay away from a lot of pastas. I'm not really a big pasta eater, but rice is my killer, man. I love rice. You know, when you come from the islands, you know, my family background is from Jamaica. And so, you know, we're used to our rice and beans. You know, anybody from the Caribbean, we like to have our rice and beans. And so that is a battle for me. But I think eventually I'll overcome it. And you know what? As long as you know, don't eat it on a regular basis, as long as it's not a daily thing, you know, once in a while you can treat yourself. So it just has to be done with balance, and you have to, you know, cut back on things and just do these things little bit at a time. I'm glancing at my stopwatch here. So that's one of the things I wanted to tell you about the potential for cancer, because see, there's several things that start to, you know, there's like a trail of things, and I've been connecting the dots, like I said. So I mentioned, well, I was going to say I mentioned this in the previous video, but actually I mentioned this in all the videos that I tried to make for you before that got cut because of the sound issues. So I'm going to bring this back up. Okay, so when you're on this path to trying to discover what led to the condition that you may have in your body, for me, I've been connecting dots for a long time. And I understand that because of the sad American diet, I was basically lined up also to potentially have either cancer or diabetes, and both of these things are in my family. Also, heart disease is in my family. And so I became very conscious about this. And I was paying attention, you know, as I was getting older, when I was in my early 20s, when I was a teenager, there was things I was noticing that was happening to my body, and nobody had an explanation for it. And it wasn't until years later that I realized, like, all these things started adding up, and it showed me that it had to do with the food. And it had to do with the food group, the color group that I mentioned to you. So, like, when I was a kid, I had something that doctors back in the day called swimmer's ear or tinnitus. And for a long time, I had no idea what that really was. But swimmer's ear and or tinnitus is a candida condition, and candida, for those who don't know it, is yeast. So you start developing yeast problems, and there's a lot of women out there that have these problems. They've got all these over-the-counter medications for yeast infections and so forth, and I happen to be one of those women that had frequent yeast infections when I was younger. In fact, I even had one before I became sexually active, and none of the doctors could understand that. I was a virgin until I was 19, and the doctors could not understand why at 16 I had a yeast infection. And it was because of diet. It was all the carbohydrates and the sugars. And if your diet consists of a lot of sugary fruits, like bananas, apples, oranges, grapes, pineapple, all those sweeter tasting fruits, which I happen to love. My palate is one that goes towards sweet taste. And if your diet has a lot of those fruits, if you're trying to eat healthier, but you're eating a lot of those sweeter fruits and you're not eating any of the kind of more sour ones, then you're still, you may think that you're doing good because you're eating more fruits, but the reality is you're pulling more sugar in because those fruits have a high amount of glucose sugar in it. So there still has to be some balance. There has to be some of the sour or the fermented in order to counteract that in those natural foods. So my computer is shaking a little bit because my belly is shaking a little bit. It's leaning on my belly. Anyway, so when you start to change your diet and you start increasing more natural foods, you need to be careful about the fruits that you take in. Now, if you have a heart condition, and I happen to know somebody at my church, a gentleman that had a couple of heart attacks. I don't think they were very serious heart attacks, but they scared him a lot. And he is from a different country, and he's not married, and he doesn't seem to have a grasp or an understanding about the fact that his health is being affected by whatever he's eating. So I spoke to him the other day, and I gave him a clue as to something that would help his heart, something very simple, and that is kiwi. If you have heart disease in your family, you want to, or you're having heart problems, or you've had a heart attack, you want to start eating a lot of kiwi, because kiwi is very, very beneficial for the heart. The other thing is that I just forgot the flow I was on for a second. Bubbles, that's what I call them, bubbles. All right, so I was talking about the fruit. There we go. I'm back. So you want to change the diet and go more towards natural foods, but you have to be mindful of the sugary fruits, and you also have to be mindful of the carbohydrates. So when I say carbohydrates, like, there are vegetables that have carbohydrates, but you want to be mindful of the starchy carbohydrates. Those are the bad carbs. So that's, again, we go back to the grains and the vegetables that are more starchy in character, the potatoes and so forth, which already we've talked about cutting out the potatoes because they fall in the family of the white stuff. So that's why I said in the previous video, you could have a little bit of the, like, the sweet potatoes and that stuff in the orange family, or a little bit of the, the yellow squash stuff that's in the yellow family, but it's still healthy and you can still eat that. But when I mentioned, the white, the yellow, the orange, I was kind of talking about more so those carbohydrates that are more grains, rice, pastas, things like that. Those are the things that you have to cut back on or cut out altogether, and especially if you're fighting cancer, because those particular foods turn to sugar instantly in your body. So if you're eating the sugary fruits, now that's one form of sugar. If you're eating any carbohydrates, any of starchy foods, that's another form of sugar going in. Then, of course, you've got just your straight sugar that's going to be hidden in so many different products, and that's why you need to eliminate the stuff in packages, because they hide sugar in that, in packages, in cans, in bottles, like syrup. Syrup has high fructose corn syrup in it, and there's literally no syrup out there that I've seen that does not have the corn syrup in it. The only way you can get away from it is go to maple syrup. And and maple syrup is fairly expensive. I mean, it's like, the last time I saw some, it was a bottle about Let me see if I can bring my hand. There's a bottle about, say, that big. Not even that big, maybe this big. This big. There we go. This big. And it was about $7 for that little bottle. So if you don't have to use something like that, or just like stay away from foods that require that, then you don't have to worry about that expense. Usually the thing that requires it is, of course, pancakes and waffles and things like that, which falls under the category of the white and the yellow and the orange stuff that we got to stay away from anyway. So it's easier just to leave that stuff alone. Now, for this particular video, I think that I want to end it at this point because there's some other stuff that I want to talk to you about, but I don't want to go into it on this video because it's going to take a little time. So yeah, I think this is a good time. I think I've talked enough for this particular video. I hope you got something out of it. Please subscribe. Please pass this along. Send it to your friends, whoever you know of that may need some answers, and try to figure out how to be more natural in their lifestyle, in their eating habits, especially if they're fighting off a disease or they're sick. Pass this along to them. Share it with your friends, your family, and whatnot. And feel free to join us on our Facebook page and our group. It's Cross of Pain. And also feel free to support me at patreon.com /Cross of Pain. And I will hope to see you very, very soon. We'll talk some more and get into a few more things about cancer. And by the way, let me just end by telling you, I stumbled across this book. And when I went to get this book, I had no idea that this book was about cancer. I got the book because the title caught my attention. The title is, hold on, let me tell you what the title is, because I have it on my iPad. Everything Happens for a Reason and Other Lies I've Loved. That's the name of the book. So I started reading this book and I discovered that it has a lot to do with this woman's journey through cancer. And there's certain things in her journey that really just caught my attention as I'm reading it. And I've bookmarked pages because I want to discuss it with you guys. And maybe you guys, we could have a discussion. You could give me some input in the group on Facebook. Come back at me with whatever your thoughts are about it, and we can just share and talk about it. But I think it's fascinating, and once I start sharing some of this with you, I think that you'll find it interesting as well. At least I hope so. And so the next video, I'm going to start talking a little bit about that. And I'm trying to think if there was anything else specific. I'm going to have to go through my notes because I've written a few things in the past about cancer, and I want to make sure that I touch upon a few of those things as well. But until I see you again, please share, please like, and I'll talk to you soon. Be blessed.